Shri Gurubhyo Namah. A very warm welcome to yet another session of Quest. Today we have a special guest joining from Mumbai, Shri PG Krishnan Iyer ji. Shri Krishnan ji is a marketing professional, management consultant, and also a management teacher. Presently, he is an education advisor with an European educational institution, and he is a keen student of Indian philosophical systems, especially Vedanta. And he regularly takes classes in Mumbai on Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, etc., along with Shankara Bhashyam. A very warm welcome to you, sir, and thank you for taking time to join us.
Thank
Before
you.
we begin the interview, let me start with a small prayer. सदाशिवसमारम्भाम् शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नमः. So Prasad, Krishnan ji, first question to you would be, this is a common question that I ask all our guests, basically to share about your early days, early influences, your upbringing. What were your perhaps your first spiritual influences, so to speak? Perhaps the teachers or personalities who have influenced you, who have taught you. Do share about your spiritual journey, so to speak.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste Nitinji. Thank you very much, first of all, for this good opportunity. I also thank the Academy and the Quest. My name is Krishnan, PG Krishnan. I come from a atypical South Indian family, atypical in two sense, actually. One is that I have been born and brought up in Delhi entirely, except for a very, very brief period during the infancy. And my family was from Palakkad district of Kerala. It is also atypical in the sense that our larger family were experts in the Veda, particularly, especially Samaveda. We were very well known in the vicinity, in the district, nearby district also, for our expertise in the Samaveda. My grandfather was a government servant and he was not involved in any of these activities that the family was really known for. And my father lost his parents early and moved to Hyderabad when he was barely in his teens. But by that time, my father was already a very well-known mantravadi, a practitioner of mantra. And in Hyderabad, much after he began his career, he ran into one great Bhagavatar, one great soul, Pudukkottai Gopalakrishna Bhagavatar, who was a pioneer and a great Bhagavata following the Sampradaya Bhajan tradition. In fact, Pudukkottai Bhagavatar, Appa as he is called fondly by people, he instituted the third part of the Sampradaya Bhajan called Dolotsavam, which was not popular maybe 40, 50 years back, but very, very popular now in every bhajan group from South India, includes Dolotsavam, you would know that. Dolotsavam is a very, very interesting part of the bhajan sampradaya, where the intimacy with the God is actually experienced by all the participants. And but soon my father moved to Delhi and I was just ready to join the school. And my father would take me along with him to the weekly bhajans that he was on to in Delhi. And secondly, those days, the most common pastime that we all had was attending Katha Kalakshepam. And believe me, those were the formative years for me. I was barely 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe just 4 or 5 years, initial years, because I could actually appreciate our rich cultural background. The Itihasa Puranas imparted that kind of sense in me early in my life. And subsequently, after maybe about 5-6 years after we moved to Delhi, Appa used to travel from Pudukkottai to Delhi almost every year. And whenever he was there, I would join him till the time he left Delhi. Throughout those 15 days, I wouldn't attend school at all. The greatness, the great thing about Appa was that the extreme devotion to the Lord. And something unimaginable. It was as if it was the Bhagavan was his Sakha. Total devotion, exactly. And of course, particularly Rama was his favorite personal god. And he would always talk about the gunas of Rama. Not just his devotion, but his devotion, he would say, is primarily because of the qualities that the Lord had. The Avatar Purusha, Purna Purusha. Not Purna is, of course, Krishna, but the great Avatar Purusha. That had a great, Appa and my father both had a great influence on me. My father was, as I mentioned to you, was also a Mantravadi of repute. And I had a somewhat a mystical background because I could actually see the impact of our tradition actually physically in front of me. For example, if we were to help somebody who had a jaundice or a scorpion bite, I could see the impact visually, how the poison would come out of the place where the scorpion had bitten the person. It would come down from the body, from the leg or wherever, then get out of the spot where it had bitten him. I mean, this was something incredible, but it had an impact on me. It made me believe that, yes, we have a very, very rich and advanced culture. So this was the great impact. So a Bhakti tradition was my first influence, apart from the mantra tradition.
That's a wonderful, unique combination, I would say. And I think your background in Kerala is kind of a cause for that, the confluence of Mantravada tradition and Bhakti tradition, I guess. More on that, I would like to ask, especially on Mantravada tradition. But before that, I believe in your college days, I think you had moved away completely from our sampradaya, our tradition, our spirituality and culture, but into more of a political nature. So, can you tell a bit about that part of your life journey?
Surely, certainly. The interaction with Appa and his tradition gave me a lot of questions on my mind. One of them was, Appa would follow one tradition wherein in one of the sampradaya, everyone in the hall or the room would touch each other's feet. And Appa was about 75 plus at that time, and he would come to me, who was barely 11, 12, and he would touch my feet also. I was surprised, I was intrigued, and I asked my father, what is this? He said, at least at that juncture, for a moment, let us all realize that we are that Brahman alone. I didn't understand this at that time. So these kind of questions, lot of questions had come on to me, even about our own deities, our devas also, which I'll talk about later. Soon I moved into the college and I was engulfed by the leftist ideology. And the concept of economic equality attracted me considerably. But fortunately, it was short-lived because of the clamping down of the emergency by the then Prime Minister in 1974. All the leaders of the group fled away, and I was left with a big vacuum around me. No traditional bhajans, no bhakti, no political ideology. By that time, I had moved out of my graduation, which was in science, to post-graduation in political science. And I got into political thought and settled on ultimately with liberal democracy. John Locke was the newfound god. Two things that influenced me to veer away from the communist ideology were a logical explanation by Karl Popper, number one. And secondly, a small novel called Animal Farm, which is very popular, of course. Animal Farm by George Orwell, which made me realize that whatever is painted, the rosy picture painted by the communists was not really so. So it was this journey, the transition was not very difficult. It was rather smooth. And the greatness of the English tradition as far as the liberal democracy was concerned can never be undermined. It is probably one of the best contribution as far as political ideology is concerned. That is how, and beyond that, I moved further into a lifestyle which was vastly different from what my childhood days were. I was almost into a permissive society kind of a lifestyle for almost 20 years. You know, what happens is when you are overwhelmed by concepts like freedom and liberty, you take it to one another extent. Okay, though albeit a negative aspect of the same concept. All concepts have very negative and even positive. Both aspects are available. And I was taken by the other extreme as far as these concepts are concerned. But subsequently, when I got back to Vedanta, it happened accidentally, we'll talk about that. The very same concepts attracted me and binded me to the study of Vedanta.
Can you please elaborate on that? And how did your kind of what I call as coming back home, so to speak, happen? Your reconnecting with the spiritual roots of this nation, with especially into Vedanta, because your earlier exposure were in Bhagavata, the Bhakti and Mantravada tradition, but now your reconnection kind of happened through Vedanta. And it's very interesting. Can you please elaborate on that?
Certainly, but before I come to that, let me just point out one thing, that all of us, everyone in this country, have this funny problem where we are into bhakti as well as Vedanta. Vedanta is part of our culture. It depends upon us to what extent we practice it. But the ideas, the concepts are ingrained in us because even in our normal day-to-day talks, we talk about Vedantic outlook. Vedantic tenets are brought in. For example, when somebody talks philosophy, the response would be, don't speak Vedanta here now. Don't bring in Vedanta here. See, Krishna, Rama, Shakti, Shiva, Vedanta, Bhagavad Gita, these are all into our life, they're all in our bloodstream. Okay. Coming to this homecoming, as I would call it, it was an accident. One day my wife wanted to, this was in the early part of this millennium, around 2003-4. She was slightly discomforted by the children's, behavior and their general outlook, etc. She wanted to put them in some study class kind of a thing. She had heard about Bal Vihar. So she came and asked me, Krishnan, this thing called Bal Vihar by some institution called Chinmaya Mission. And can we put our children there? I said, by all means, close your eyes and go ahead. She was very surprised. How do you know Chinmaya Mission? And you also seem to know Bal Vihar. It is then that I told her that during my college days, when I was away from all this sampradaya and our tradition and our culture, one thing stayed with me, which was an annual talk by Swami Chinmayananda. And he used to visit Delhi. Mind you, I would not attend the Gita Jnana Yajna, although Gurudev himself invited me specifically twice, but I never went. At that time, Gita was looked upon as a dogmatic philosophy. And we used to listen to Swami Chinmayananda very regularly whenever he was in Delhi, and he used to pay an annual visit to Delhi. And I was definitely influenced by him, but not to the extent of getting into Vedanta or Bhagavad Gita at that time. When this thing happened, we had to organize a public function where we had to manage and get hold of some 10, 12 senior people for the study group. This was the instruction from the Chinmaya Mission, whom we didn't know in Bombay. And we had to get at least 5 to 8 children for the Bal Vihar class. Then your children you can start your class. We somehow managed that. And we could find a teacher immediately for Bal Vihar. And they said, Mrs. Krishnan, why don't you yourself take the class? So she started taking Balvihar classes. And the gentleman who was the negotiator, who was the middleman between us and Chinmaya Mission, his name is Sri Vedugopalji, very, very ardent disciple of Swami Chinmayananda, very senior officer from the government of India. When the study group was formed, he said, Krishnan, I would like you also to attend this session. I said, maybe, sir, it is not my cup of tea. He threw a challenge to me. He said, Krishnan, you come for just 2 classes. And if you don't like it, you are at liberty to walk out. I agreed. It was a good deal and I could retain my freedom. So I went and attended his class. First test, as you know, in Chinmaya Mission, the first test would be Kindle Life. And the very first lesson was freedom and licentiousness. We were on to that chapter and suddenly, I had goosebumps when the chapter was on. And I could recall very many lectures and talks of Swami Chinmayananda and how I was influenced by his concepts, his talks, his ideas, and the way he talked, the way he put it onto us. And I took part in the discussions very eagerly and very dominantly, in fact. And in any case, freedom was my favorite topic. I mean, in fact, for me, freedom is not a virtue, it's a value for me. Mm-hmm. And I took part in the discussions, and 1 or 2 chapters down the line, we had that the Vedanta concept of the personality, the 4-tier personality. Then I again recall, my God, in late 60s, I was impressed by Dr. Eric Berne of the transactional analysis. He said, here is something which our rishis talked about maybe 7,000-8,000 years back. And here one great psychologist is talking about it and the world is gaga about it. They're so in place for 3 decades, transactional analysis. And Dr. Eric Berne became a household name actually in the world, not only in the discipline of psychology. I think that was a great trigger. I wanted to know more and more and more of this, and every chapter of Kindle Life is a great introduction to Vedanta. Even now, although I take Gita and Upanishad with Shankar Bhashya, I would love to take Kindle Life and Tattva Bodha, which is the introductory text, definition, book of definition, at any time. I would in fact have that as the preference text. That is how it all began.
So after your kind of introduction back to Vedanta, so did you study under some teachers, all the Bhashyas and the primary texts, Gita and Upanishads?
Certainly, Nitinji. One thing about me is that anything and everything impacts me very deeply, whether good or bad, both impact me. And this study of Vedanta impacted me considerably. We didn't have an ashram in New Bombay. Now, we prevailed upon Chinmaya Mission to grant us an acharya. This was very early, within 1 year of my introduction to Vedanta. And they said, no, this, that problem, let the ashram come up. It may take 3-4 years, but it will come up in New Bombay. We already got the land, etc. He said, fine, look here. We will sponsor the acharya. We will buy a flat. We will take care of a requirement. We will finance everything. But we are a group of 15 people here, but we want an acharya. And we were kindly given an acharya by Chinmaya Mission. Couple of acharyas came as a stopgap arrangement. Finally, we were granted Swamini Anagananda, who is the present chief of the Thane ashram of Chinmaya Mission. She came and started taking classes for us. And she was very proficient and a typical Shankara Parampara disciple. And she wouldn't swerve away from Shankara Bhashyam at any time. She was tutored by Swami Subodhananda, who was the chief acharya for the Hindi section of Chinmaya Mission's teaching college in Siddhabari. And He was in
Okay.
turn tutored by Swami Akhandananda Saraswati. So, you know, the tradition, the Shankara tradition flowed very smoothly. And I was very, very fortunate to be tutored by her. And we used to have classes every day in the evening, sometimes in the morning. I was running my own consultancy, so I had a flexible time. So I used to attend the day classes also, evening classes also. And by that time, my teacher, Venugopalji, also wanted me to take the classes for Kindle Life for the new entrants, because we already got onto Bhagavad Gita. And the concepts from Kindle Life always, peeped into Bhagavad Gita. And people were blank. A lot of people were blank. So he said, you alongside parallelly take classes for these people who are the new entrants. And my interest in Vedanta and teaching grew much faster at that time. That is how I believe I was very, very fortunate to have had Swami Anaganandaji and the grace of the Shankara Parampara onto me. I think it was the greatest gift that I have got in life.
So that's wonderful. So moving on, you mentioned about Kindle Life, the introduction. Is it Kindle Light or Kindle Light?
Kindle Life.
so kindling the life. Yeah, I get it.
Exactly.
So nowadays, with all these gadgets, Amazon Kindle and all that, when we read Kindle, people always mistake it. Is it Kindle? Which Kindle?
Oh,
So,
exactly.
on a serious note, I mean, you mentioned about this course, introductory course, Kindle Life, quite a few times in the short duration that we are discussing. So,
Right.
can you elaborate more on about the nature of this course, the Kindle Life, and what does it constitute, and how does it help for a new person? The person, the new seeker who is just starting on the spiritual journey, so to speak.
Okay. As I mentioned, although we have had this thing in our culture and in our blood, people are still blank about Vedanta. Not many people would know anything beyond the names of four Vedas. Or they would have Bhagavad Gita in the house, but it will be kept on an altar. Nobody would read it. In the south, it is different because Ramayana, Mahabharata, not Mahabharata, Ramayana and Bhagavatam are definitely read every day by most people, most devout people. So when you say come and attend this study class after the initial reluctance, like, oh, I'm very busy, I don't have time, I can only come on for Saturday evenings, Sundays are for the family, etc., etc. The real reason behind that is the fact that they are hesitant to take on something which they are not really aware of. Now, Kindle Life attacks that apprehension directly. It doesn't talk about Vedanta and Brahma Sutra and Upanishad so openly or so frequently. It starts off like a very general, like freedom and licentiousness. We will talk about what you would be impelled to jump the red light. Should you do that or not? You have the freedom to jump the red light, but then it is not really freedom, it is licentiousness. You learn that. Now, this is the approach that Gurudev had taken. And he had meant this as an introductory test because it doesn't get into the technicalities so blatantly. It does get into technicalities, but very subtly. That is the beauty of Kindle Life. You don't have to nail the concepts onto people. It just settles on their minds very calmly and very comfortably. Maybe a little slow, but very definitely. That is the beauty of Kindle Life. And that's why I like it so much.
Apart from the topics of freedom and licentiations that you spoke, does that course uh, take up other issues as well?
Every aspect. I talked about the personality, four-tier personality, the mind, intellect, spiritual aspect, physical, mind, and intellectual and spiritual aspect. It talks about vatanas also, not in the technical language as such. It talks about every aspect. It talks about, it introduces Vedanta very subtly, talking about the self, initially, and talking about Brahman, the reality, doesn't use the word Brahman very often, but the reality. Why should you and how would you know the reality or understand the reality at least? It does it very smoothly, talks about everything, including meditation. Then at the end, there is a big chapter, which is actually a talk by Swami Chimnyananda on the Karma Yoga. Very, very elaborate talk on Karma Yoga. So it introduces Vedanta, maybe not as thoroughly as Tattva Bodha, but nearly to that extent. So that you can pick up the stick subsequently.
At least basically gives an introduction or an exposure to a glimpse into Vedanta, so to speak, we can say, but especially useful for a newbie in spirituality.
Yes, absolutely. It kindles your interest. It doesn't put you off. You know, people, you must have also seen people come and join the group and they subsequently wither away. It happens with many people, but nowadays I find not many people are still coming onto the fold of Vedanta. This is what was the vision of Swami Chinmayananda. He wanted Vedanta to reach as many people as possible. And I think he did achieve that objective very, very definitely.
Definitely. So my next question is, we have been discussing about your early influences and the Bhakti tradition, the Bhagavad Katha tradition, and the Mantravada tradition. But your homecoming happened through Vedanta. So now, currently, after your homecoming, so to speak, have you integrated your earlier experiences, earlier traditions into your Vedanta practice, or you are more now Vedanta oriented alone, or how is it for you now? What is your personal sadhana at this moment in life?
That's a very tricky question. Nitinji, see, conceptually, I stick to Advaita Vedanta particularly. We are all exposed to all the three streams to some extent, intentionally or otherwise, it does happen. And my choice was Advaita Vedanta. And Advaita Vedanta is vastly different from the background that I have had. But nevertheless, the perspective that we have towards life is ingrained and it has actually come out of the Vedanta, whether it is Advaita, Advaita, Vedanta. It has come out of Vedanta only, our entire culture. That is why it's called Sanskriti. It's complete culture. So intentionally, yes, I would love to, and I do stick to Advaita Vedanta, especially, for example, if we are in a class and if there is a discussion coming up, and you will have all sorts of people in the class, study class, people with Advaita background, people with Vishishta Advaita background, etc. And somebody, they always remark something or the other about Advaita, particularly Shankaracharya, then the concept of Maya, which is probably anathema to them. Now, my wife would say, Krishnan, why do you fight in the class? I say, no, I don't fight. Maybe I talk very fast and maybe I talk a little loud. That is my reaction to anything about, I want to always be emphatic about the concepts and the tenets of Advaita Vedanta. Nevertheless, Nitin, I have seen one thing. I do not do puja. I'm not a temple freak. But I cannot take away Rama, Krishna, Shakti, and Shiva from my heart. I maybe even tried to do that, but it is impossible because every Indian, for that matter, and every Hindu has these personalities in their personality. These gods are part of their, personality itself. It cannot go. Suppose I happen to murmur a bhajan song, the tears would roll down me. I may say that I am not into Bhakti tradition. Then what is this?
I think this is a big misconception. I think that Vedanta does not go side by side with Bhakti. And one of the big evidence is we see all the Shankaracharyas of the four matas, they do everyday Nitya Puja, Nitya Anushtana. Now it is with the access with TV and technology and all. Everybody can actually see it by sitting at the home. How devotedly, for example, the Sringeri Shankaracharya does the puja
We
every
watch
day.
it
Yeah, we can
every
watch it. So there should be no doubt at all that the mantra tradition or bhakti tradition, they are not actually contradictory to Vedanta. There is our essence of our culture is in synthesis rather than pursuit of extremes.
Absolutely. I have a take on this, very clear take, which is actually open to everybody everybody to see. Our guru, first guru, as far as the Uttara Mimamsa is concerned, Veda Vyasa, the great Advaitin, somebody who has written a great text like Brahma Sutra. Now, he has written Puranas. There must be a reason. Okay. And even Shankaracharya, for that matter. There have been other acharyas in the Advaita fold who were a little more rigid. But Shankaracharya was very, very accommodative to the idea of bhakti. He himself composed so many verses on so many deities. Although his philosophy, his Bhashyam would not talk about the Sakara Brahman very often. But it has been around all the time in his texts, in his Bhashyam, etc. Okay, so our gurus have also followed this tradition. When I say Astikyam, it does not mean just a belief in the text. It is also includes belief in the Guru Parampara. Guru Parampara is very important for us. How did our gurus behave? Did Vyasa behave differently? Did Shankaracharya behave differently? Yes, in between we have had acharyas, because the point here is that whenever they are on to certain philosophical aspects of Advaita particularly, they are very, very context specific. For example, when Sureshwara, I would not call him as the post-Shankara Advaitin, I would call him as a pre-Shankara Advaitin after he's transformed into an Advaitin. He was much more rigid than Shankaracharya himself. Sarvagya Muni was also a little less accommodative for that matter. So our acharyas predominantly, Madhusudana Saraswati, he was a great Krishna Bhakta and a super Advaitin. So it is there not only in our philosophy, it is in our tradition as well. Secondly, we all know that Bhagavan, Krishna himself talked in Gita about Lokesmin Dvivida Nishta. Lokesmin Dvivida Nishta. He talked about two streams. And of course, you will have to have a question on your mind. How do we manage these two trains together? Now, you don't have to have it together. Essentially, Swami Chinmayananda has written volumes on this particular topic, and he has very clearly explained that these two had to be followed serially, which means you engage yourself in Karma Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is part of Karma Yoga. That was very clear to me after reading the texts of Shankaracharya and Swami Chinmayananda. And he said, you have to have, we all know that we need a Chitta Shuddhi initially to get onto Vedanta. So this is a preparatory stage. Karma Yoga, including Bhakti Yoga, is a preparatory stage. So hence, it becomes an integral part of our sadhana, our pursuit, our jigyasa, our explorations. So once you have achieved sadhana chatushtaya adhikaratvam, and once you have achieved chitta shuddhi to a reasonable level, you can get on to exploring Brahman. The very first sutra of Brahma Sutra says, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Thereafter, you embark on inquiry into Brahman. So thereafter means there is something to be done prior to getting onto this inquiry. So clear. And tons of texts have been written on this one particular sutra alone. So the philosophy, the tradition, the acharyas, everybody has talked about. And secondly, Ritin, in practically speaking, a guru doesn't, what was this topic? I'm sorry. We were talking about bhakti. Sorry. Okay. I think that's it. It is just to be pursued serially. Initially, Karma Yoga, in whatever form, either as karma or as bhakti or sadhana, whatever. Then you get on to Vedanta. It does not mean that it's just to be followed strictly, but your initial emphasis would be on the karma yoga. Subsequently, you move on to more and more of jnana yoga. Otherwise, jnana yoga is not something which will come very easily to people. And it is not, Bhagavan has said himself in Bhagavad Gita and in various other texts in Upanishad, that it is something which is very difficult to imbibe. It takes time. So there is no doubt there.
That is wonderfully put, Krishnaji. I usually like to emphasize that the fourfold framework of Purushartha is given so that moksha is placed at the last to show that that is the ultimate goal. It is not possible to achieve it in this life, or maybe in next 10 lives for most of the people, but we have to align our life, orient our life towards that goal, and then fulfill our dharma, artha, kama in that path. So that is why this Vedanta comes as a goal aligner to posit, to show us what is the ultimate goal. Then we have to decide where we actually stand, whether we stand, whether we have chitta shuddhi to practice jnana yoga, whether we do not have chitta shuddhi, we have to practice karma yoga, whether our heart is melted to practice bhakti yoga. And to put it in the words of Madhusudana Saraswati, who says only those whose heart melts can actually practice bhakti yoga. So I think this is the most fascinating thing I find in our philosophical, the Arsha tradition that the rishis have given us. Moving on, you have been teaching Bhagavad Gita for quite some time, and especially you have stressed on teaching and learning Bhagavad Gita through the Bhashya, through the Shankara Bhashya. So tell us your experience as a teacher of Gita, and second, how has been the usually the response of the students to, when they are introduced to Gita, and third, most importantly, what difference what kind of difference have you found between teaching Gita only, so to speak, and teaching Gita with Shankara Bhashya?
Great, that's a wonderful question, Nitin. Very important and very pertinent. Yes, Bhagavad Gita is very well known to people to whatever extent, maybe superficial knowledge of Gita. Okay, there's something like this exists. In Hindus, most Hindus know about, even non-Hindus know about it. Okay, when people take interest in Adhyatmic life, they are curious to learn something which they already know something about. Maybe just the name, or maybe few chapters, or maybe Karmanyavadikaste, and say full stop, nothing beyond that. But they have had some familiarity with this text. And the eagerness, the curiosity is to learn Bhagavad Gita first. So once the Kindle life is done, Tattvabodha is done, we do not mind taking a Bhagavad Gita, but it will be done without the Bhashya. This is the tradition in our study class. However, in my case, Nitinji, I have always taken classes with Shankara Bhashyam alone. There is a reason, because it has been ingrained onto my mind that if you want to understand Vedanta and understand these texts, Gita and Upanishad, etc., it has to be with Shankara Bhashyam, because that alone gives you a samyak darshanam, a holistic view to the text and what is meant in those texts. What does the scriptures convey to us? So you get a samyak darshanam that will ultimately lead you to a samyak jnanam. What is our objective here? To achieve that jnana, which will liberate us from this cycle of birth and death, okay, moksha as we call it. Now, if you want a holistic understanding, Shankaracharya's commentary alone helps you. Others people have different versions, different perspective. In fact, one Dr. Kamath talks about the original Gita had only 62 verses. Actually, brilliant observation, very brilliant. And it could all, in fact, be true. But for me, Shankaracharya has written commentary on all the 700 or 701 verses. So for me, the entire text is sacred. And he is incidentally the only Acharya who has commented on all the verses of Bhagavad Gita. The other Acharyas have not, they have skipped many verses. So Samyak Darshan, the holistic view of the scriptures, what the import of the scripture is given to you by Shankaracharya. I'm sure the other disciplines like Vishishtadvaita, Ramanuja's work is also a great work. They will have their own perspective. But for me, since I'm an Advaitin, Shankaracharya's work is very, very important. And the way Acharyas, the mastery of the Acharya over the language, the way he chooses specific words, and the ability of Acharya to convey the import of the scriptures is phenomenal, actually. That is where you get a hold. Secondly, I am able to fuse in the tenets of Advaita Vedanta when I'm teaching Shankara Bhashya, using Shankara Bhashya. I think ultimately that is the purpose. My objective is not to teach Bhagavad Gita, but to apprise the people about Vedanta and particularly Advaita Vedanta. So to serve my interest and my objective, I always take classes in Shankara Vedanta only. In fact, on the lighter side, to answer your question, how do people react? I'll give you one example. A few years back, maybe about 8 years back, I was asked to take a class of a very large group, 80 people. And the brief was that, Krishan, they want to learn Bhagavad Gita in 1 year. I told my teacher, Venugopalji, sir, how is that possible? He said, you go start the class, do as you please. So I went ahead, began the classes, and I took the first chapter. There were almost 75 to 80 people in that class. And very interested. I also took the first chapter in greater detail, explaining the various things on the war scene, battlefront. And when I got onto the second chapter, and when I got onto the Jnana Yoga, the class strength dropped to 15 straight away. Imagine.
From 75 to 15.
15 straight away. But however, these 15 people were very, very committed, very interested. They enjoyed Shankara Bhashyam and they stuck on till the end.
How long did it take you to finish it?
Just to give you an example, I think it took me about 2.5 years. But the second chapter alone took me 1 year. Second chapter and the 13th chapter took longest time, and of course the 18th chapter. Other chapters I had to move fast because they were also very curious. Everybody wants to know the entire Gita as fast as possible. So I got into some kind of compromise there. But second chapter alone I took 1 whole year. And that is when I learned myself. See, when I was learning Gita, we learned Gita maybe about 4 or 5 times from Sri Venugopal and Swamini Anaganandaji and other acharyas also. But when I was tutored using Shankara Bhashyam, it was a paradigm shift altogether. Understanding was much greater, and my commitment to Advaita was greater, and my commitment to Vedanta itself was, very, very strong. But when I started teaching Bhagavad Gita using Shankara Bhashyam, I think I was transported to another world, and I could see that I was getting into the every nuances of the Advaita philosophy, and I was trying to probe more and more into it. There were questions, yes, a lot of questions came up, but I made sure that I got answers either from my teacher or the groups that I was involved in. I had participated in the Vedanta groups, the e-groups in Vedanta. And those really helped me to understand Shankara Bhashyam to a very, very great extent. And I was very, very pleased with whatever adventure I took on to.
Wonderful, wonderful, Krishnanji. It has been an amazing interview. Very happy to, listen to all this wonderful experiences that you have went through.
Thank you.
As we are nearing our time of conclusion, let me put one last or last two questions, so to speak. Um, Especially in today's time when most of us are introduced to various texts because of technology and all, things are easily available. Most of us, including myself, we read things on our own rather than going to a teacher. Most of the things that we read is self-study. But nevertheless, the guru is at some point an acharya or a guru or a teacher is important. So, what is your view on this studying under a teacher or versus self-study? How how can one balance it, or what is the relative importance of
Absolutely. Guru is an integral part of the learning of Vedanta. We all know that the Shruti texts are cryptic, number one. They may seem contradictory, number two. Okay. So, how do we understand this? We talked about Samyak Darshana. For example, if we take, let's start with Bhagavad Gita. Now, Bhagavad Gita, Shankaracharya has written a detailed commentary, Shankara Bhashya. Now, 8 very, very great acharyas have written commentary on the Shankara Bhashya. Okay. Then you have gloss by Anandagiriji, Swami Anandagiri. Then you have gloss by Ramaraya Kavi also. Okay. Now, obviously, there is a need to elaborate what the commentary of Shankaracharya said, because it is not very easy for us to grasp. Although Shankaracharya is very clear, not cryptic like the Shruti, and there is no contradiction, there is a lot of clarity. Even then, to understand the import of this text, you required, or we required, 8 acharyas to comment on his commentary. And this commentary is conveyed to us through a physical acharya, our own guru. In any case, humility is one major ingredient in learning of Vedanta. And if you do self-study, that is gone. There is no humility there. In fact, your ego will be, boosted further up. Oh, I can read, and, I can understand all these things. That is not true. That is only your ego talking. It's not your knowledge coming out. So obviously there is a need. And I have understood, even whether it's, I'm not talking about Mandukya Upanishad, for example, which is even very difficult. You have to go back to the Guru time and again to understand what the commentary is talking about. Just a commentary, I'm not talking about the text, mantra. And a guru doesn't only teach you the text. He actually tells you what the reality is and how to understand this reality. He doesn't only lecture, he lives as an example to teach you Vedanta. There are many ways. You must have heard about the famous story of how Tapovanam Maharaj had taught Titiksha to Swami Chinmayananda. One early morning, he asked Gurudev to go and get down and get water from Ganga in a bucket. And he made Gurudev do that 6 times. Gurudev was wondering, Guru doesn't take bath here. Why does he want me to get the Ganga Jal up here? He said he used to get the bucket every time, Guru, and put it for, making it hot. Then Tapovanam Maharaj will get up and put the water out and tell, go and get one more bucket. And after 6 attempts, he himself went down to Ganga and took bath and came up. It took a little time, but Gurudev understood that, okay, Maharaj is teaching me Titiksha. So there are various means. And as you know, there is a teaching methodology in Vedanta. For example, if how would people understand the concept of creation that the Upanishad talk about? Then suddenly you come to other Upanishad, particularly Mandukya, where we talk about no creation at all. A total U-turn there, 180-degree turn there. Unless you know the teaching methodology, unless you know the concept of Adhyaropa Apavada, you will not understand this thing one bit. I am very certain about it. You cannot. Vedanta is not to be read and understood. There are people who have study classes, they discuss, but sitting at the feet of a guru is a must. Hasn't Sadanandji done that? He used to come all the way from US every year to Madras to listen to Swami Paramarthananda. Why did he do that? Leaving an important job. He was a very senior person in the laboratory. And he used to still come spend about 2 months every year. Entire time spent with Swami Paramarthananda. That is the level of importance that a guru has. Can never be undermined.
Thank you for so putting it so clearly, and that importance of Guru. As the very first prayer that started the session with was about Guru, about Dakshina Murti and the Guru Parampara. And again, on the behalf of entire Advaita Academy and all our viewers, I thank you, Krishnanji, for taking us time, giving us time, and I'm sure all our audience would deeply find this session deeply meaningful, and hope it will be inspiring for many more.
I hope so too.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Great. I look forward to comments of your audience very eagerly. Thank you.
Definitely. Viewers, do not forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We have a Facebook page also, Facebook group. You can join it for discussion on Vedanta, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. With this, we conclude another session. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Tat Sat.